Hi everyone, it's Dr. Ramani. Welcome back to this YouTube channel on narcissism, narcissistic relationships, healing from these relationships, and just simply making sense of them. Today we're going to take on, I guess we could say it's a proverb, but I don't know if it is. Let's just leave it as it. Have you ever had anyone say to you, first time, shame on them, second time, shame on you? Let's unpack that. This proverb sounds so pithy and clever, but it's a real problem for survivors of these relationships. So that seems quick, right? First time, second time, right? But this proverb, or this saying, is about shame. And shame is a central burden that many survivors of narcissistic relationships carry, right? So let's, again, whether this proverb, adage, whatever it is, it carries this slightly judgmental tenor that the first time someone does you wrong, well, that was them behaving badly and that's not cool. Shame on them for behaving badly. However, the next time you are wronged by that person's behavior, well, shame on you for sticking around. To which I say, no, no, just no, absolutely no. This is basically a proverb or a saying that codifies blaming the person who is being mistreated. The idea that, well, now that you know what they're about, you just need to get away from them. And if you don't get away from them and they harm or hurt you again, well then, shame on you. They're the one who harmed you, but shame on you. That seems rather draconian, extreme, unempathic, and it kind of lets the world and the abuser off the hook. Yeah, sure, that person is being terrible to her, but shame on her, she knew it was coming. Just because someone says something a lot, first time shame on them, second time shame on you, doesn't make it true. And this is one of those cases. Many survivors carry the wounds of the shame on me. I'm the one who stuck around, shame on me. And this mindset makes healing from these relationships so much more difficult. First, it means that a person who is in a narcissistic or toxic relationship may simply start withdrawing. This idea of shame has already been internalized by you if you're stuck in one of these relationships. And then the idea that the world will double shame you, well, shame on you, means that withdrawing is self-protective in a way. Either you will get the, well, you know that's how she is, just get over it. Or, well, you're the one who chose to stay. Rarely do people say, what that person did to you was not okay. The proverbial victim blaming is sort of a terrible built-in feature of our society at large because it creates a sense of pseudo-safety in the world. Well, that bad thing happened to that person because they stuck around, rather than having to take note and having to call out that there are really toxic people and patterns in the world at large. It makes the world scarier. Second, it can also be an impediment when things like this are said to people. It can impede them from seeking out help when they're in any kind of narcissistic relationship. The idea of, well, if I tell this therapist all the stuff that's happened in this relationship, they're going to think I'm the one with the problem, or I'm the foolish or stupid one for sticking around. It can create a fear, as though therapy could be this shameful confessional where you share what happens in your relationship repeatedly, and there's a risk that that person will ask you, well, why are you still in it? First, if a therapist asks you why you're still in it or why you didn't leave, find a new therapist. But if you work with someone who gets this, that won't be what happened. It actually makes sense why you stay. Whether it's the second time, 250th time, or 1000th time they do something bad to you, there is no shame. Third, not everyone understands, most people don't understand how complex this process is. Trauma bonding, self-blame, betrayal blindness, cognitive dissonance. The deck is stacked against you, and your nervous system is trying to protect you. So you're not going to always be able to process memories of the bad things that happen, and you may disproportionately hold on to the good days or justify or make the pieces fit. So when the bad stuff happens, and it always will in a narcissistic relationship, you are then left with, well, I stayed, so shame on me? No, actually it means that all of these things, trauma bonding and all the rest of it, are expectable responses to emotionally abusive and confusing relationships. In fact, if you did get up and leave after the first few times that something bad was done to you, that's actually what would be the shocker. And since most of you in narcissistic relationships have been in these relationships for a while, these relationships are a process of indoctrination and a slow process of subjugation and the loss of your identity and your reality. And finally, the architecture of these relationships, the idealization that happens early on, the confusion when the bad days start trickling in, and that it takes a minute to reconcile the good and bad days. The problem with the first time shame on them, second time shame on you model is that it does not account for the constant shape-shifting that happens in these relationships. That a bad thing may happen, shame on them, but then it's really good or fine for a while. Then the bad thing happens again. It may feel like the first time again, because if enough time passes. This carousel between good and bad is why people get stuck. On average, it takes people at least 12 months to even begin connecting the dots on the idea that this may not be a healthy relationship. And by then, the trauma-bonded, cognitively dissonant stuff has firmly taken hold, especially if you have a history of these relationships in your family of origin or in your prior relationships. So it can feel like a lot of first times. The social media and digital landscape of our world also means that quick messaging is often being used to communicate subtle dynamics in these kinds of relationships. Most of the rules about relationships do not apply when we are talking about narcissistic relationships. So the second time shame on you may feel like an appealing, quick kind of rule, but it is harmful as hell when it's accorded towards people who are in narcissistic relationships. Being emotionally invalidated and abused in a relationship is not about shame on you. It's about shame on the person abusing you, always. Showing yourself grace and understanding that there is no shame in caring about someone and giving someone a second chance or pushing away the bad memories. All of that's normal. And in many cases, it's been happening since you were a child. It's not like a child can say, well, first time shame on you, Pop, but now shame on me. That kid probably carries a shame always. No shame ever. Another person's bad behavior is their responsibility, not yours. So the struggle really becomes is that people need to stop this quick idea, well, if you stayed in it, you knew what you were buying. It's almost like, well, you bought that car that had a problem. This isn't buying a car. This isn't about saying shame on you because you stayed. It's about people needing to understand how subtle and often really, really entrenched these dynamics can be, why people get stuck. And then by using this shame on you language, people will often feel that if I say what's happening, people are going to think I'm foolish. Nobody wants to feel foolish. It makes sense why people stay, and for a very long time. It makes sense why they often can't extricate. We live in a world where we shame people for being estranged in their families, and then we shame them for enduring abuse. So when it comes to the world at large, you really can't win. But in your own life, at least give yourself permission to dial down the shame when you can, when you hear nonsense like this. Thanks again.